Our very last topic here is going to be what I'm calling special procurement programs, ones where governments make various types of concessions to various business types. These programs are, in one way or another, trying to correct historic imbalances in the amount of money flowing from the government to businesses. The basic concept is that larger, well-established, white and male-owned organizations have historically won more government contracts than small, minority-owned, women-owned businesses, and governments should try to correct that by giving special attention to these types of vendors to promote growth. Note that I've said government and not necessarily local government. You will find these types of programs at all levels of government, from the federal on down to local county, city governments. The following relates mostly to local and state governments, but the federal government definitely has similar programs. So these are the types of businesses that are typically included in special procurement programs. The first three are often combined into one program and referred to collectively as MWSBEs. So you may often hear special procurement efforts referred to as MWSBE programs. Minority-owned and women-owned businesses are pretty self-explanatory, but basically they mean that the primary owner of the company identifies as being of a racial minority or a female. Small businesses can be defined in a couple different ways, or in a combination of ways. Sometimes organizations are defined by the number of employees they have, the number of locations they have, or their annual revenue. You can see how those could be a little subjective though. After all, some hedge funds only have 3 employees, but they make millions of dollars a year, and some low revenue companies may just be nonprofits. Disadvantaged businesses is a more catch-all term and is used primarily by the federal government. For example, a local government that gets a federal grant to build a road would have to make sure sufficient DBEs are included in the process. Veteran-owned businesses are a relatively new category, but with more and more veterans out there in the private sector, I think this particular type of business will become more common in these special programs. Note that with these programs, with the possible exception of veteran-owned businesses, there is almost always a geographic limitation on the vendors. For example, the business must be located within the same county as the local government or within the same county or neighboring counties. So in the city of Charlotte, ours is Mecklenburg County, and then any county that touches Mecklenburg County, including a couple counties in South Carolina. For state procurement programs, the businesses might just have to be headquartered in the state, but not necessarily a specific town. So why do we even have these programs? The reasons are complicated and may vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, depending on where the jurisdiction is located. The overarching reason is that MWSBEs have historically been underutilized by governments due to racism against minorities, favoritism, and the old boys club mentality of procurement that was prevalent among the predominantly white and male local government structure. Minority-owned and women-owned businesses were looked over for work for many years because of perception that neither was capable of running a business or just the barriers of starting and running a business by those types of groups. More generally, since these programs often require the business to be local, MWSBE programs seek to foster economic development and entrepreneurship in a jurisdiction's immediate vicinity. The jurisdiction wants to not only send some of its money towards those vendors, but also show other buying entities that the businesses are there and can provide quality goods and services. The push to use veteran businesses is a little more complicated. Providing work for veterans is not a concept that's new. Just think about FDR's New Deal programs or the GI Bill after Vietnam. But this is a somewhat new iteration. I think veteran-owned businesses concessions are a natural progression of those efforts to foster entrepreneurships among this often fragile and challenged population. And veteran businesses are also really good at providing sensitive services like security, intelligence, investigations, and so on. So the programs sound great, right? Local governments sending their money to businesses that may be struggling, one big happy community, right? Unfortunately, that's not always the case. First, there's definitely abuse of the minority, women, small, and even veteran designations, and I've actually seen this happen more than once in my job. Let me give you an example. ABC Security is founded by John Smith, a retired police officer. John has hired all male retired police officers to perform security services. Then he learns about how his local town wants to hire more woman-owned businesses. So he sells 51% of his business to his sister, Susan Doe. So now, lo and behold, the company is a WBE. It sounds sly, right? but I've seen it happen multiple times. And yes, you could argue that whichever woman he sells the business to is now making more money, but is that really the goal of this type of program? Really, it's not. Another concern is that in many cases, small businesses just don't have the capacity to meet the needs of large towns. Take background check services. When I recently solicited this service, the MWSBE office at the city identified 13 small businesses in our area that do similar work and said we should just solicit to those specific companies. The issue is that the city does thousands of background checks each year because they're required whenever we hire, promote, or transfer an employee from one division to another. Is one small business going to be able to meet all the needs by the city by itself? Probably not. Furthermore, will they be able to respond quickly and put the municipality's need above those of their other customers? Maybe and maybe not. Another concern is that in many cases, small businesses just don't have the capacity to meet the needs of large towns. I already said that, didn't I? Sorry. Here we go. Next paragraph. Finally, there are challenges when a small business is given a sizable contract by a municipality. Sometimes the business has to spend so much of its time and resources serving the local government that it lets its other clients fall by the wayside instead of fostering those relationships. Then, if the government terminates the contract for whatever reason, the business is unable to keep the doors open without its biggest, or maybe even its only customer, the jurisdiction. This is more common than we would like it to see it, unfortunately. The city of Charlotte has effectively put businesses out of business when their contracts terminated because that business was spending so much of its time serving the city. So the good news is that I think these programs have a lot of benefits. Many jurisdictions have elected to involve MWSBEs at the subcontractor level rather than the prime contractor level, meaning that they aren't responsible for an entire project, just a portion of it. At the city, we use a ton of MWSBEs for construction contracts, for things like HVAC installation, carpeting, and other discrete tasks while building a new facility. I think the biggest unintended benefit of these programs is that they give small businesses a voice in local politics, policy writing, and decision making. By having an MWSBE specific office within a jurisdiction, you hand these special businesses a group of advocates for their particular needs and strengths. You also raise their awareness of opportunities they may otherwise not be pursuing, the government contracts, that is. Finally, and this is more an intended consequence, though not a public one, these programs do enhance the perception of the local government pursuing them because they're shown to be trying to help the little guy. That being said, and so that I end this lecture on a high note, I think there's a lot of opportunity for the jurisdictions not just to look good, but also to affect the behaviors of other buying entities and encourage them to also use an underutilized business. In fact, that's a good place to leave this lecture and this class. By endeavoring to conduct procurements in an ethical, accountable, open, and inclusive way, the government not only has a better chance of getting the best vendor for what they need, they're also encouraging other organizations to purchase goods and services at a high level. So that's the end of the course. For those that don't work in public administration right now, I guarantee that you will run into this material at some point during your careers because everyone ends up sitting on an evaluation team, purchasing from contracts, or managing a contract of your very own at some point. I hope everyone learned a lot about public contracting, dealing with vendors, contract documents, and a little about ethics and accountability too. If you have any questions, you know where to find me. It's been a pleasure working with all of you this summer, and I hope you guys have a great fall.